Welcome to our November 2020 monthly meetup for our Lean Law Accounting Pros. I am just thrilled and excited to have Brian Kennel with us. He and I have gotten acquainted this year as his firm was looking at Lean Law as a solution relative to his practice. And I liked our conversation so much that I wanted Brian to come in and speak to this group. I think he's a really smart dude and has a lot of wisdom to offer to this community. So we're going to start the first part of the meeting, just getting through some stuff that we normally do. And I'm really going to focus more of the conversation or more of the meetup on the conversation with Brian and less on demoing Lean Law, but there are a few things that I want to get in. I'm assuming everyone can see my screen, just a nod of the head. Maybe Tracy confirm that for me. Great. This is our agenda today. We can see we've got our key conversation with Brian, and we'll get into PerformLaw and what they do and what Brian's role is and all sorts of good conversations there. We have our LAP Accounting Pro updates and question of the month, and then a few announcements and whatnot. So just quickly with announcements, we do have a webinar tomorrow, November 12th. It's part of our 3 ways, the title is 3 ways to stop attracting the wrong clients to your business. It's my conversation and continuing conversation with Lauren Fogelman. It's the 3rd in a series that we've done. If you're interested in participating, we will record it, so if you can't attend, but do get signed up so that we can ensure that you get on our list. It will be a lively conversation. Our next LAP meetup is in December. I know we have the date, I think it's the 16th, but it is our year-end review and what to expect in 2021. My fellow colleagues, Gary Allen, our CEO, and Fred Willard, my CTO, will be joining me to talk about the year ahead, as well as Tracy talking about this program. So join us for that and to talk a little about where Lean Law is going, where our relationship with Intuit is trending, and where we expect to be. And then later this month on I think it's the 18th, 19th, and 20th is our online QuickBooks Connect. They had over 25,000 people register for QuickBooks Connect online this year, as compared to like 4,000 to 6,000 that show up in person. Lean Law will be doing coaching sessions. I think they call them coffee talks. We will be doing demos. We have a virtual booth, so you'll see some content specific to QuickBooks Connect, and we're sorry we're not actually getting to see folks this year in person. From a product perspective, we had a productive month, and we're really excited about where we are with Lean Law. A few just notes. The Microsoft 365 development, the integration is happening. It's now in beta and will go live out to early beta clients in probably this week or early next week. So that'll be online in December. The first aspect of that is time tracking from Outlook, Outlook email, Outlook calendar. We'll start to creep our way into time tracking and time behaviors in Teams and even potentially in the productivity apps. Phase 2 of that relationship gets really interesting because our API is very rich, thinking about staff productivity, thinking about little nuances of practice management or process management within Office 365. So we're really excited about that integration and see that as a key partner for Lean Law. Adjustments and write down, you've been hearing me speak about that for months. It is live in beta. So this means that we will now have in our product the proper feature to write down time. A timekeeper puts 10 hours, the lawyer says, yikes, I can't bill 10 hours. I can only bill 5 or else that client's gonna get irked at me. What happens to that 5 hours? What do we do with that 5 hours? We don't wanna write it off and just have it go to vapor. We wanna capture it for productivity reasons. Brian will speak to that in a bit, but we wanna capture that by timekeeper and by client, so we have good metrics there, and that's live right now in the developer environment. It'll be live in the product, as I mentioned, in a week. Well, it won't be live to the audience in a week. It'll be live in very key betas in the way that we do it. So we'll be introducing it to some of our key partners from the accounting perspective to get their 2 cents on how we executed it from a UX, UI standpoint, of course, from an accounting perspective. And you see me, I'm just managing some people coming in late. this is an exciting thing. I'm actually going to quickly jump into QuickBooks custom form field integration. So a big part about QuickBooks Online Advanced, let me get to the right screen, is this feature, custom fields. So historically, QuickBooks has had something called classes, tagging mechanisms, and they were somewhat primitive in that you could only tag like an invoice, you could class an invoice with one tag. They've advanced this with in the QuickBooks Online Advanced form to be custom form fields. You can see that I'm playing here on the left with different responsible attorney, Pennsylvania as a location, claim number, matter name, different data points. What's exciting about what's happening here is that with classings, we could have done things like under reports, under profit and loss by class, I could look at, if we look at Frederick Taylor, I could sort of develop a profit and loss, based on a responsible attorney. So you can see, this character had 88,000 in revenue and he had 12,000 allocated in overhead. This is not a very good looking P&L because it's not complete, but the idea is I can run P&Ls and look at it by practice area, taking loads of overhead from QuickBooks, applying it into this P&L format, and then use that for, performance and or even potentially tax. So what custom form fields, let me just jump back to it, offers us is a more advanced field. And that field can be, again, in this first iteration, it is transactional based, it's not line item based, but it allows us to then look at things like, and Lien Law automates this, who was the originator, who was the responsible attorney, potentially occasions or other data fields. The idea that we can come in and add those attributes into a transaction and start getting interesting analysis like profit and loss by location and practice area. So I want to know what this attorney's P&L was for this practice area in that location of their office, and using the full, load of QuickBooks. So we are the only third-party developer in all of the 700-800 app ecosystems that have access to this feature in the ecosystem. And we've brought this into our product and we'll be demonstrating it. It was demonstrated in our last product meetup, but you'll start to see some marketing activities here, and we're excited to bring this into the community. And QuickBooks is going to be putting some horsepower behind this as well, because I think it's a valuable feature for QuickBooks Online Advanced. Just so you can see, when you add a field, you name it, and you have these different types of, is it a drop-down list, is it a number, is it text? What forms do I want to see that typical item on? Is it a transaction, a customer, et cetera? So you have quite a sophisticated series of data points that you can tag things and then run derivative reports from that. And when you look at, if you look at an invoice or something like that, let me just pull up an invoice real quick. These, you can see these come in where you can tag. Now, Lien Law will automatically, this was done before I had it wired up, assign these values based on Lien Law's integration, so it automates having to, drop things down, but you can do these tags. So in addition to tagging at a line item by a class, you can now use these custom form fields. Again, I don't want to spend too much time, but I wanted to just spend a moment sort of teasing that out to the community. Now, what's next? If anyone here is using Lien Law, you know that Lien Law feels a little sluggish right now. We've gotten a little behind in some of our performance with larger data sets, so we're spending some dedicated time this month to performance enhancements. We're excited about a client page, a one-page in-depth snapshot financially of what's happening with a matter or client, taking a series of data parts and putting it in a very clean, quick image so that you can get your hands on a particular client matter. Disbursement specific to attorney compensation. So the idea here is we want to continue in that tracking of attorney compensation. We do an excellent job of tracking attorney compensation in real time across, who was responsible, who originated. We even have a second metric, referral. Now we want to add the tail end of that process of distributing the money out to the law firm folks and managing that. We got an invoice paid, now we need to distribute it. The addendum to that is also paying an expense. We got paid for an invoice, let's tag expenses now that they can be paid. So this last little piece of workflow, this last little piece of workflow is there for the tail end of disbursement. So we can track it on the front end to make sure the matters are all set up, who originated, who responsible. You can split origination between two folks on a particular matter. Then we track it in a real-time way within QuickBooks. Now this last piece is the disbursement to make sure that the money is dispersed properly to the law firm. And then one little nuance is split fixed fee revenue tracking. So if Brian and I were, co-counsel on a contingency matter, and because Brian's a grand poobah, he gets 70%, and I'm his junior attorney, I get 30%. We can take that fixed fee and, from a compensation standpoint, allocate the 70 to Brian and the 30 to me. That's a split fee allocation. What you're really seeing here, and this is just a general theme that we'll talk about for 2021, is the growing up of lien law to match the mid-market client, what we call mid-market client, that 5 to 35 person law firm. These are features that we're just building in to continue to make lien law fit that market thing. So, okay, Tracy, here's our LAP question of the month. I'm going to ask it and ask Tracy to answer it. So it's a two-part question, and a lot of folks, when they come to lien law, I'm going to paraphrase, used to have their, whether it was products and services or whether it was on the chart of account, a slew of itemization specific to expenses. And the same might be on the revenue side, sub-accounts on the revenue side specific to attorneys or location or something like that. And they get to lien law and they say, hey, how do we do that? Because we want to be, how do we say it, frugal with the chart of accounts and in products and services and not have it be slobbering all over the place, as I call it. So Tracy, can you kind of speak to that question of how lien law overcomes that challenge?
Sure. Okay, can you hear me, first of all? Because I've been messing with my, okay, perfect. So yeah, those actually, both of those questions are probably the two most fretted about questions, especially from people who are coming over from a non-QBO environment and who may have been doing accounting kind of old school. In the old days, and I've actually experienced this in person myself, advanced costs were usually listed as prepaid expenses, and they were literally on the expense side of the P&L. What happened on invoicing was there was a contra account created that would be a recovery account for each expense, and theory being everything should zero out at the end of the month. So for some people, when you tell them right from the get-go, when you're helping them set up their chart of accounts, and you say lien law is going to be looking for, first of all, one account called either advanced client costs or prepaid expenses or whatever you'd like. And that freaks them out first and foremost, because they're like, well, what about all these other accounts and so on and so forth? And then they get a little frazzled when you explain that it's an asset account typically, because again, they're used to having it be an expense account. The asset part's pretty easy sell, because it just say, well, it's kind of like a little mini loan to your clients. And when you invoice it, it just slides over to another asset account, being accounts receivable. And then they kind of get it and they're okay with that. But for those who insist on still being able to break up their prepaid expenses or their advanced client costs, there is a way to do that. Let me share my screen real quick. Can I share, Jonathan, without you having to, you have to stop sharing so I can share.
Yeah.
I don't have to, I can just talk.
Well, I'm going to stop sharing anyway, so go ahead.
Okay, so let me just get out of all of this. So basically, in QuickBooks on their chart of accounts, can you see my screen?
No.
You can't see my screen?
No.
Okay, hold on.
Not sure.
There.
Oh, there it goes.
That required me actually clicking on share screen. Anyway, sorry. They can still have all of their accounts that they like to have. They can have it by court filing fee and so on. All they have to do is, again, when you help them set up an account, you want to make sure their advanced client costs are sitting under other current asset. And then you can just set up all of their accounts that they're used to using. So it, whether it's medical records or expert witnesses, and you set them up similarly. And then all you have to do is you're just going to make them a sub account of the main advanced client costs. So when they write a check and they're tagging in the category, maybe court filing fees or legal witness, expert witness or anything, they can still do that. but the main expense, the dollar value, will go through the advanced client costs, and it will still end up in lien law in the expense column. So everything will still flow through, and they can have their different categories, and everybody's happy. The second part of that question was, similarly, a lot of people come from a prior tool where they're able to have multiple income accounts. So on their invoices, they bill separate line items, maybe for, they'll classify it or tag it as family law income or criminal defense income or something like that. And so when you tell them that, well, lien law is going to point to one main income account, and then they freak out a little bit. And then you say, but here's how we get around that. So in lien law, basically when they set up their account, as long as they're going to go and they're going to set up practice areas, and they can actually require that every matter needs a practice area. As they're doing all of their work, any matter that they're doing work on, billing time or expenses or fixed fees against, at the end, as long as that matter has a practice area that it's been assigned to, they're able to still divvy up their revenue by just doing revenue by practice area. Let's see.
And the same goes for revenue by attorney as well. Instead of having attorneys in the chart of account, and the revenue by attorney in particular plays into that custom form field in the sense that we can now tag that responsible attorney, originating attorney, or even down the road practice area into the custom form field, so you can run reports off of that in the QuickBooks side as well.
Right. So basically, that's the answer to the two main objections when it's coming to the only telling them they can only have one main expense, one main account for advanced client costs and one main account for their income. That's how to basically overcome all of those objections.
Cool. Okay. So let's move forward. Thank you, Tracy, for that. I want to make sure that I might be muting some folks because I hear some background. I think it's this person. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears and we're going to move to the main part of our conversation, which I'm most excited to talk about, which is having Brian here to introduce his company to it. So let me get my notes up. I just put them away. Just want to make sure I have them handy here. So there it goes. So Brian, I'm really thrilled to have you here, and I'm excited from a standpoint because obviously you can see by the tone and tenor of this conversation, we talk a lot about bookkeeping and accounting, and there's this interesting tension in the accounting and bookkeeping community to be this trusted advisor. And there seems to be, and we're going to come back, I'm going to go backwards to get forwards, but the main thing I want to come out of this is you're a management consultant. You are a trusted advisor. That's what you do. That's what your firm does. And there's a lot of pressure for these folks to become this trusted advisor, right? To be that advisor, and not everyone's working with the firms of the size that you work on. So at the end of this conversation, I'm hoping that our audience gets some sense of, what it is a management consultant does for law firms. And I'm going to work our way back there through that process, but that's what I'm hoping to get out of here. And I want to start by saying, help introduce yourself to the group. I mean, obviously you're the CEO of PerformLaw, you're based in Louisiana, but give them some color about your career. I mean, I saw that you went into law, you came out, you worked for an accounting firm that dealt with law, you went out, you have a sort of kind of mirrored background. So give us a little background on how you got to be where you are today.
That's great. Well, thank you for inviting me, by the way. And it was fun. It was really fun watching, we did the demo with you, Jonathan, maybe 6 months ago on lien law.
Yeah, it was.
See how far it's coming, as fast as it's coming, is really exciting for us because we always need good alternatives. And you guys look like you're going to be a great alternative. So
Hey, Brian, speak up a little bit so everyone can hear you okay. It's a little bit, at least for me, it's a little muted.
Okay, hopefully this will be a little better. I'll lean in as much as I can. Can you
hear
that?
Just you're fine. I wanted you to be conscientious of it.
No, thank you. I'll pick it up a little bit. But anyway, thanks for having me. So yeah, I originally started, believe it or not, as a bookkeeper in a
Really?
Yeah,
you were a bookkeeper? I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a CPA by training. but I wasn't then, and I wasn't even out of college. I just was working in a hotel, and the guy that I was working for left to go run a law firm, and he said, "You ought to come do this gig. You know, this is be more fun." And I just took to it like a, you know, really a duck on water. I just loved it, and I had I had
Go
a
ahead.
little I had a little adjustment to make between sort of accrual and cash accounting. I came out of a really heavy accounting environment with lots of accruals and and then you go into this cash basis environment and you have to think completely differently. And so I went from that position, then I kind of worked my way up, wind up running the whole firm. And then I was really young, you know, I was probably 28, 29 years old at that time. And I wanted to go out and slay dragons and, you know, conquer the world. So I started a couple of my own companies and, you know, did pretty well on one of them, not so good on the other two, but the one was big enough. So then I decided I love law firms and I wanted to consult with them. And I joined the accounting firm and did that for 3 years and then realized that I just wanted to really build a more full service consulting firm and did that for the last, it's been over 20 years now.
What is it that you love about law firms?
I just like,
Why that niche versus, you know, I don't know, manufacturing
I don't know,
or
anybody on this call who's in law firms, I got to warn you, if you haven't been in them very long, once you're in them, you can't get out. You know, it's a little like Hotel California, but
I
I just,
kind of know that feeling.
can't
Having
leave, right?
having in my seat that you once you're there, it's like it's very sticky. But what is it? So maybe ask the question a different way. What is it? You know, what is it the nature of a law firm and its professional services that are attractive to you relative to maybe some other industries?
Well, I think it's you know, actually the complexity of the people. I love the complexity of the people. It's very challenging sometimes, but you know, these are really generally brilliant people, and working with these people is a lot of fun. I like that, and I like that they will pay for quality. I mean, that's the thing. And anybody who works in law firms, you know, their margins are generally better than an average operating company. So
Yeah.
it's just been a good environment for me.
And for the audience, just a one-liner on what's PerformLaw. That's Brian's company.
Yeah. So if you can think of it in your own, you know, in your own position, in what you do, you know, law firms are, lawyers in particular, are really, really busy and just don't have the time to make good management decisions. And we fill that gap, you know, pick up the phone. They need answers. They need it without a lot of analysis and a lot of data, and they need good judgment. And that's what we do.
So what's an example of a management decision? Like what's an example of like, so there's a gap, and I would imagine sometimes it's not that they don't have the time. I would assume in some instances they don't have the know-how to help frame the question and frame the, you know, get the data and get through the analysis.
Yeah, it can range, Jonathan, from really anything with us, because, you know, as long as I've been doing it and how we built the company, but it could be, you know, hey, we're losing lawyers to the competition and I think our compensation's wrong. You know, how do we fix that? To, you know, we want to buy a new time and billing system, or our management systems are terrible and we're going to, you know, what do you think about that? You know, so it really runs the gamut. We don't know if our, you know, we don't know if our marketing systems are working, or, you know, we need to shift gears in our marketing systems. All those things generally come to us.
And so is a management consulting firm have its roots, at least from your perspective, in accounting and accounting workflows, but then it extends up into the business management of the firm that goes beyond just the numbers? I mean, if you're talking about retaining, you know, lawyers, that could be culture, that could be compensation, it has little to do with, I mean, it could do with the architecture and infrastructure of the technology. It seems like from a management perspective, your scope is broader than where you were years ago as an accountant.
You know, every management consulting firm's a little different. You know, some, again, will focus on, you know, getting into a client and wanting to do everything for that client. We take a little different approach to that. I mean, we want to come in and, you know, our shared experiences and our training, you know, we want to do whatever we can do better than anybody else. And then we want to work with partners in those areas, you know, who can do better than us. So we are literally in almost every one of our accounts, there's usually an IT consultant involved in some way. There can be a marketing consultant involved. We may be part of that team. There may be a CPA. Usually there is a CPA or accounting firm involved. We generally start from where they leave off. Okay. So, you know, we're just really a little more amorphous than that. We're kind of like water. We just go wherever the gaps are, and that's what we specialize in. So, for example, if a client of ours comes to us and says, look, we really need a strong, you know, well, we want to go to the cloud. We want to go full on cloud, just to give you this in this context. We don't hold ourselves out as engineers, but we'll teach them how to buy what they're trying to buy. Okay, so we'll say, well, if you're going to go full on cloud, this is how you need to evaluate cloud providers, and we'll handle the purchasing decisions for them.
And are you in the weeds doing the change management, you know, teaching people the new structure, or is it more of a recommendation and you bring outside experts into that?
Depends on what it is. Sometimes we'll go ahead and implement directly, and sometimes we'll bring in outside experts. I mean, we're what's called like a gap player, where if there's no one else available to do it better than we do it, we'll just do it directly. Okay.
So how did you, I'm going to get in a bit into some of the life cycle things, but I want to take a step back and ask a question. I'm going to ask two questions. First, to get this out of the way, define mid-market from your perspective, because I know that you mid-market. And by the way, one thing, Brian, hey, if anyone has a question about something, chat it to me. I've got my chat window up. I've got my chat window up. So if you've got something you want to do a follow-up, let me know. If it's too complicated, I might put it off and just answer it. So going back to you and I first talked, and I said, hey, we're mid-market, Intuit's mid-market. And you said, that doesn't feel necessarily exactly like my definition of mid-market. So what is your definition of mid-market?
Well, you know, I look at mid-market as, you know, 50 to 75, honestly. Okay. You know, it's all geographic. So a 50 or 75 person law firm, for example, in New York City is not that big a deal. Okay.
Right.
But a 50 or 75 person law firm in a New Orleans or, you know, some other smaller Nashville, whatever, you know, that's a big deal, you know. So the mid-market, really, the way we see it, you know, we call small mid is going to be anywhere from not so much solo or micro, but small mid for us would be about 10 to about 30, you know. And then once you start getting past 30, you know, you're sort of approaching our definition of mid-market. But
what's the composition of PerformLaw's client base? Do you find it more small mid, or mid, the true conventional mid?
In what you mean the competition as far as
the composition, not competition?
Like
who are you working with mostly?
Yeah, I would say we have a pretty fair distribution of, say, you know, 7, 8 on up to about 50. We have one firm that's 100, but we're in a different role there. We purposely limit it. I mean, the way our business model works is we won't let any account that we work for get over a certain revenue amount every month. So that kind of keeps us out of the large deals, because I don't want to get tied down in the large deals. We're working for a lot of people.
So kind of turning back a little question that I had before, which is what I heard you say was, as a management consulting firm, there is quite a diversity of conversations that you might have with a law firm. You mentioned marketing, you talked about IT services. You and I have had extensive conversations about financials. And what I heard you say was, where there's a gap in PerformLaw, you find a resource to co-op with you so that you can bring that resource together. And so my question is, one is, how did you discover what those gaps were for PerformLaw? And then I don't think it's rocket science to go fill the gap, but when did that come up? Was it retaining a relationship, winning a relationship?
It starts actually with an honest conversation with yourself and your team. It's like, because we're and a lot of times in our accounts, we have a tremendous amount of influence and frankly power, you know, in one sense, the power to recommend. You know, we don't make direct decisions for our clients, but if you're a trusted advisor, you know, you have an ethical consideration there that you have to adhere to. But for us, it boiled down to really more of an introspective kind of an approach. Like, what is it we're really, really good at? What do we really, really care about? There are things that go on in law firms all day long that are really important things. And yet we don't really have that passion for those things. Okay. And so if you're honest with yourself and you say, look, I will do this, I'll do yeoman's job at this, but this person is really passionate about it. And if you want the best, you ought to get this person. So that's kind of how we do it, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because I found myself in that similar situation where I've become a trusted advisor and created rapport with a figurehead at a law firm or some other business, and I'm selling software, yet they're asking me about marketing, or they're asking me about tech, what the tech, because they just see me as that person who might have an answer. And if I was in your position, I could see how, well, I don't know a lot about marketing, but I might align myself with someone. Do you, just a little bit on the business composition, do you co-opt that marketing voice in and it's just a lens of PerformLaw? Or do you keep that as a separate brand and say, hey, here is XYZ person, you can interact with them? So meaning, are you co-opting all that in the PerformLaw brand and you just run all those services, or do you compartmentalize it?
That's a great question, Jonathan. No, we actually want our partners to have direct relationships with our clients. We wouldn't introduce you if we didn't trust you. And so we never we don't do the sort of what I call the subcontractor model. You know, a lot of consultants do that. I mean, and some of them do make it work really well, but we're going to bring the partner in. We're going to have them have a direct relationship with.
Yeah, I find that the most successful because for two reasons. One is, at the end of the day, if I'm selling the service, I'm responsible for the service. And if it's not my expertise, it concerns me. And then the second reason is it allows that person to shine and create their own business and their own relationships. And we want goodness for them as well. And I think that's the reason why I wanted to hit upon this for the group, is that they feel this. So one of the two things we've learned so far is that, hey, a management consultant's doing more than just financials. There's other things that are co-opted into the offering. And the second thing to the group is you don't have to do it all yourself. You can find relationships that make your brand stronger, because you're still going to control the relationship. You're still going to have that with a law firm. So let's talk a little bit about engagement. So you've got a brand and you go out, and how do clients find you?
Mostly, I'd say, it used to be, probably 60% current clients, 70% current clients, that just refer us. But now I'd say 90% of it's coming through digital, just search, mostly through search. And they get to the website and they get to us.
So you built that search, and is that a conscientious effort in the business to say, okay, I've got some, I mean, I can see your blog posts. Brian has a pretty prolific blog at his company, PerformLaw, and we'll put the link up in the chat session so everyone has access to it. Is that a big effort that you put forth on to seed that organic content?
We just did this, funny you asked this, we just did our financials yesterday. We spend about 15% of our revenue on pumping content, and whether that's explainer videos, blog posts, ebooks, resources, we publish like crazy.
Yeah, and I want to be conscientious to the community here. Brian runs a sizable business with lots of resources, and it's a real marketing tactic. If it was just Brian and Brian was the consultant, the referral might be enough deal flow to satisfy his business. To do, and I think what you need to hear is to do a proper, organic SEO campaign. He's doing 15% of top line revenue?
Yeah, 15. That's us. We're a little bit probably, you don't need to do that much. We're doing brand development too, so there's lead generation, where you're doing pieces designed to specifically targeted at a service. And then there's just brand development, where you're just trying to, make PerformLaw part of this community. And so brand development's the expensive piece.
And I mean, Linlaw, that's probably the second or third biggest expense for the company, which is, which is our marketing efforts, which we get most of ours organically, but we had to seed it with all this content over and over from our perspective. So let's go talk about, I pick up the phone and I call you, right? So I'm a law firm. Who in the law firm are you actually talking to? Meaning, who's making that call? And Brian, sorry, one quick question. Focus on your small mid when you think about these answers, because most of the folks here aren't dealing with 50 to 100 person firms. They're dealing with micro and what you would call small. So
Yeah.
let's make sure we keep the conversation tailored to this community.
Sure, absolutely. No, that's good. So typically it's a partner or it's really one of three people. It's the office administrator, manager, you know, it's a partner, a specific partner, or it is the managing partner, secretary, believe it or not, you know, because in some firms, in the smaller firms, that person has a lot of influence. So typically it's one of those three, but I'd say 80% of the deals that close usually start with one of the partners giving us a call.
And what is it, when you first get on the phone with them and they make a call and you've scheduled it and now you're going to have a meeting conversation, what is it that you want them to say, reveal, expose, or get into that helps you understand if they're going to be a good client? Like, what are you probing around?
So the first thing I do is I try to encourage them, like, just in a narrative sense, just tell me your story. Okay, just tell me the story. I don't care about the facts and the figures right now. We'll get into all of that, but just tell me your story. Tell me your hopes, your dreams, what you're trying to do, where you are now, what you want to transform into, what particularly, you know, bothers you about your situation, you know, and just get them talking really about, you know, just what it is that is at sort of the root of their concern. Sometimes it's not a concern. Sometimes it's like, hey, we're growing, we're doing a merger, you know, but it's just getting them talking about what they're trying to accomplish in real terms.
And is the motivation for that because the narrative kind of gives you the most details, or is the motivation for that if I can have an authentic conversation with that person across from me on the screen or phone, that trust is beginning? Because I would imagine fundamental to your success is this word trust. So what is it? Both, some of it?
Well, it's most people, including myself, we want to be heard. You want to make sure the person on the other end is listening and truly understands. Okay, so, you know, you reached out, I agreed to speak to you. You know, you're looking to me for help. Tell me what you want help with. It's just building that, you know, that sort of rapport that comes from listening.
And do you find that that sometimes these people are guarded in the beginning? Because
Oh,
I would imagine sometimes guarded because they're conditioned to be guarded, or
Mhm.
guarded because maybe there's some embarrassment, right? Because they're underperforming.
Yeah. That's why you have to really sort of be the judgment-free zone, right? Because they are in some, if they're calling you with a problem that they're embarrassed about, you know, that's comes from sort of that's just years of experience when, you know, you sort of start picking that up. But generally it's just, you know, if I feel like that's starting to happen, or I sense that's starting to happen, I might tell them a little story like, yeah, I can relate. We have a client that, you know, went through that one time. It was just to make them feel a little bit more comfortable that they're not the only one.
And so when does it shift from them telling the story to you actually selling? I mean, do you
Well,
ever sell? Do you
I never
frame it?
I'm not really great at selling, okay, because it's consulting is really not done that way. It's not that transactional, at least not what we do.
Right.
If I were in your business, you're getting a phone call in your business within a context, right? If I'm calling Lean Law, I'm already 80, you know, I'm already thinking about I want software generally, okay? If they're calling us, they want a range of solutions, okay? So I don't necessarily, I tell them based on the story that they're telling me or based on their description of their issues, I give them a range of approaches that we might take to you know, to help them find some resolution or to, you know, get where they want to go. And it's usually within that conversation about the range of options, maybe something we've done before, you know, some comments on the story they've told us and how we would approach it is when you start to what I call shimmy toward an approach. Okay.
And I would imagine, because with Lean Law, we don't take a very salesy approach. I mean, we take the sales mindset of helping people buy versus trying to sell to them. Part of that's just who we are as a company. Part of that is those tend to be the best customers. Right? Like, we're not interested in signing people up, doing all that work to get them onboarded and then find out it wasn't a good relationship, because That's the most, for a software as a service company, the most expensive part of a sales transaction is the customer acquisition cost. You know, the idea in our model is if we get them onboarded, we have a long tail of income downstream. And I imagine that's kind of the way that your business is too, because once you get, there are some ongoing monthly mechanics that turn into a bit of an annuity stream for you, I would think, on some level.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Jonathan, we've had clients in our firm for 20 years, you know, for as long as the firm's been technically open under this iteration for about 18 years. I was doing it myself for 2 years before I branded it. But I've had clients, the office I'm in right now, we've had this client for over 20 years. And so I always, in the way that I've trained my team is like, look, we're going to have to live with it. You know what I mean? So let's make sure whatever we're doing with and for these people, that we're recommending something that we're going to be proud of a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, because, you know, that's the end game for us, is that long-term relationship.
And so when you're in that conversation, and I just want to spend a few more minutes on that sort of entry level, because I think what the challenge is, again, these folks are getting a lot of pressure to become trusted advisors. And, you know, and I imagine, and I just speaking about the financials a little bit, because I know there's other sort of more esoteric or more different types of problems you're trying to help these law firms, a merger, things like that. But going back to the ones that are just not operating well, there's this idea that, you know, you got to convey, here's the solution, here's where we go. And you want to, I mean, obviously they perceive you as some subject matter expert from the get-go, but is that your blogging that helps create your sort of credibility? Is it being able to listen? Is it being able to frame the solution? Where do you find the most influence in terms of being perceived as the subject matter expert?
Well, they're really sort of, the blogging helps, right? You know, if you read something, and that's pretty straightforward. The self-help resources are really helpful. You know, we've had people literally who will go use the self-help resources and then say, look, I've gotten about 80% of the way, you know, can you help me with the other 20%, which is great for us. Like, yeah, I'm glad.
Hold on, I want to explain that to the group. So what it sounds like you did is you took some main themes of questions or problems that the law firms want to solve, and you created a blueprint that says, here's your self-help, you can go do this yourself. And people are fishing for that. You're using your blogging tactics, and they're fishing, they're receiving it, they're working on it. Then they get 80% and they're like, heck, this is harder than I thought it was. So you're saying you're converting clients from a self-help tool into a customer.
That's one way. The second way is, hey, that got us a long way. Is there another level of this? Okay.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point. How do you, so what I'm hearing you say is, I got you here. Now there's a whole nother level of insights, awareness, and how do you convey that next level is even there when they may not know it's there?
By sending them some additional information, and the more people do this stuff and have success and get through that, okay, they get to a level and they know there's more there. They're not really sure what exactly it is, but they know there's more there because they put in the legwork to get where they are. Okay. And so the approach for us is, look, we can go in literally, we can go into a firm. I mean, I literally was thinking about this when we were having this conversation. I have one firm that I still go by as one of my first accounts, and I'll pay their bills for them. Now I haven't, you know, just because it's fun and it's interesting, and I haven't done it, it just keeps me grounded. And then I have other firms where I'm writing entire compensation systems for them. The point I'm trying to make is, you never want to really be the hero in this story. You want the clients to be the hero in this story, and you want to help them get as far as they can so that when they are engaging with you, they're solving real problems that have high value. Okay?
So this is important, and I think that from the sort of accounting and bookkeeping mindset, it's the offering is so utilitarian, and it's sort of utilitarian in the sense that we do something monthly and then we produce a report. Right. And I think that you and I have had that conversation. That's critical to your workflow. You've got to get the data in, data out, so that you can, present data. But I feel like the real greatness of your relationship with your firm is the conversation you have above and beyond the mechanics of the month to month in terms of data presentation, and helping them from the first say, you listened and said, what are your dreams and hopes and aspirations, right? So imagine there's some life cycle there, and maybe this is a good segue to talk about when a client says, yeah, okay, I'm interested, and let's just narrow this down to the accounting and finance side, not talk about marketing and some of those other things.
Sure.
But when do you go in and say, okay, I got to look under the hood? Because, or do you not? Meaning, if you're going to have a financial relationship with them or financial discussion with them 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 months down the road, do you need to layer in the infrastructure and validate that you can get your data out, or you just not care what's in there?
So that's an excellent question, and because we're pretty good at figuring out whether the data is good or not. Okay, we have our own metrics, we have our own. We've been looking at so many firms, and I will literally go to a firm and say, look, your data is really good. I trust it. I don't have to do a lot of the remedial stuff. So let's start here. Or your data is not very good, and we literally have to get a Robert Half or an accountant or a bookkeeper to come in and clean up your balance sheet, clean up, because I don't even have a clue. Your data is so bad, I don't know how to help you yet.
And are
So
you doing that for them as part of your offering, or outsourcing that?
we manage it, but we're not going to do bookkeeping and that kind. Not that I'd like doing it actually, but it would be really expensive to have us do it, but we'll manage it. So in that sort of context, think of it this way. I'm sort of the CFO at that point, and I'm like, look, our accounting system is struggling. Our systems aren't working. We're going to get some help down there, and we're going to get that fixed. And they look at me and go, great, let us know when you get that done. Here, whatever resources you need, get them. As opposed to us kind of going in and doing the actual bank recs and things like that, or whatever level we're on there.
So if you think about your sort of product, right? I know it's your insight, and that's a piece of it, but there's a layer to it, which is the data. And I'm going to get to some of the tools and whatnot in a second, but I'm curious to know, because I remember you showed me that sample report and I was like, oh my God, I'm all over this. It was really exciting. And we had that conversation where you told me about your business. So tell the audience a little bit about like what it is on a monthly basis that you're really communicating back to the law firm, and to whom in the law firm are you communicating? Meaning, of course, there's a P&L of sorts and a balance sheet and some of those instruments, but are there other reports that you think every month is just, here's the standard reports? And then the additional layer is, how do you help them interpret it?
Right. So what we try to do, it's kind of less is more, right? These are really, really busy people. They have a limited amount of time. And, if you can keep it pretty straightforward and keep it pretty simple for them, you'll capture their attention. And then if you can capture attention, you'll get some action. But we typically, we'll start a firm out, if the assuming, as you said, the underlying bookkeeping and accounting is solid, we'll start in the profitability accounting. So we'll start looking at the profitability of lawyers. We'll start looking at the profitability of clients, and we'll start talking about the things that affect that profitability. And a lot of times it's really the HR, human resources part of it, where, we've got maybe a couple of relationships that are struggling in the firm. Maybe somebody's going through a situation. Maybe somebody's working on a client that they don't really like working on, and it's showing up in their work. So we drill into, all else being equal, why isn't, Sally as profitable as Jane? Why is Bob's realization so weak when, everyone else on that account is so strong? And so that we don't just stop at saying like, well, hey, you got a problem with Bob, or you got a problem with Sally or Jane. We get right into what is the problem with Bob, Sally, and
And
Jane.
how do you get in there? Meaning, is it because you've got data that says there's a problem? Is that just now you're maybe not a CFO, now you're a COO, a COO, and you're sort of saying operationally what's going on? I mean, is that, and is there, can you do that in month one, or does it take, a series? Because you said if I can get their attention, I can make change. So do you have to kind of build up the trust before you get there? I imagine there's certain situations where Bob is so underperforming, they're like, hey, we got to dig into this immediately.
Yeah. Our experience has been within 90 days, we can usually have them turn. If there's we can usually turn any situation in 90 days.
And how do you help them understand what profitability means? And what I mean by that is, the mindset of an attorney historically has always been cash flow, right? I got cash in my pocket, I'm paying my people, I'm doing, and most small micro firms run on gut. They're like, okay, I can look at my hours in a matter of minutes, and they kind of know what their cash is.
Yeah.
And you come in and say, well, you're not being profitable. And he's like, well, I think I'm being profitable, right? I got
Yeah.
money in my pocket.
Until they
So how do
get
you help coach him on that subject?
Well, they get their estimated tax bills and, and then they sit there and go, crap, we spent all the money. We don't have the money to make tax payrolls. But, well, that's more of a projection, right? So if you keep going the way you're going, this is where you're going to end up. All right. And if you make this tweak or that tweak, or you make this change or that change, this is where you could end up. And you're going to be a lot happier if you take path B instead of path A. And if you can get buy-in at that point, if you can get buy-in the direction, the better direction, where I want to be, where I want to end up, where I want this firm to end up, the kind of opportunities I want to create are, I got a better shot of doing that if I take path B instead of path A. If you can articulate that on the front end, and you can project, through both financial and, and help them create a vision. If you could do those two things, they're generally going to follow the the
So
vision.
is that what you just said, the fundamentals of a trusted advisor?
Mhm.
Someone who can articulate both the financial representation of the future, but also the sort of meaning of it as it
Right.
relates back to that individual's, well-being? Is
Yeah.
that sort of the nut of it?
That is the nut of it, but what you have to remember about an outside consultant versus an in-house person, and I've been both, so I appreciate this. If I push somebody a little too hard, or I get into a politically difficult situation in the firm, the worst that's going to happen to me is I'm going to lose a client. Okay, I got lots of clients. All right, but if I'm the in-house person and I'm pushing this thing too hard, and I make my point and I alienate partners B and C, but partner A, now I'm in an untenable situation. So a lot of times these firms are smart and they're wise, and they realize that, hey, if we bring someone from the outside in that's going to be less dependent on us as a job, we're going to get more objective advice, and we won't put our people in the middle. And so we may be able to get results. The in-house people often know exactly what the problems are. They know exactly how to fix them, but it's risky to push those issues. And so working with them, we can push those issues, and they're more protected.
So you're saying being the outside voice backed by data allows you a little bit more leeway to cut through some of the crap that may exist, that may have been institutionalized, or
Yep.
and you can say, here are the facts, because everyone's saying, well, Brian's the expert. And it
Right.
kind of distills down the emotionality of it all. And now it gets down to like meaningful change.
Yeah.
So so we talked about some P&Ls. Are there other reports that you deliver, again, focusing on the narrow of the financials? Are there other sort of baseline reports and other sort of things that you say, okay, if you guys are going to be a trusted advisor, you got to be thinking this kind of data that you need to communicate to your clients on a monthly, quarterly, yearly kind of basis?
Yeah. So every firm's a little different, but within a sphere, meaning insurance defense firms, there are metrics, for example, that insurance defense firms need to manage and to pay attention to that aren't really as prevalent or relevant to say a healthcare firm or a commercial litigation firm with high rates, or a contingent firm. So you have to obviously create the metrics based on the type of firm you're dealing with. But what you're really looking to try to do, and this is a little abstract, I don't mean to be, but what you're really trying to figure out with your clients is what really drives their revenue. Okay, if it's an hourly billing firm, an insurance defense firm, for example, well, rate pressure is there, and billing rates are not going to fluctuate all that much. Now it gets down to rates realization, and really, frankly, a cost per hour. If you can get your cost per hour into a certain range, which is a combination of what you pay for, what your overhead is, and the kind of hours you're getting from people, then once you get that to an optimum point, now you're focusing more on realization. So it's great, Jeremy's working 2,200 hours a year, you're paying him this much, it's all good, except you're writing about 10% of that off, both at the time of billing and then the client's clipping you for 4 points on the back end. So, what can we do about that? and so that would be just one example.
And and do you find that we just have a few more minutes? So
Sure.
again, anyone has any questions for Brian, let me know. But do you find that, like, when you came into PerformLaw, whenever that conception was, I mean, you just gave quite a fluid articulation of a workman's comp, core issue, and you
Correct.
named 4 or 5 different practice areas that all behave differently, contingency
Right.
to litigation and whatnot. Is it something that maybe you start narrow and try to find clients that are of a certain niche because you can learn that business really, really well? Because what I'm hearing you say is all law is not the same law when it comes to profitability and utilization and realization, that niche matters. And did you start at a niche and then build yourself out, or did you just win clients and learn it?
Well, I started out honestly all hourly, defense. I was a defense side guy, just did defense. If it was hours times rate, it's totally comfortable in that world. But over the last 5 or 7 years, we are probably 40% or more of our revenues coming from the other side now, from the contingent oriented side. And they're frankly a lot of fun. They look at things completely differently. And just in the whole approach, you're shifting gears from this maximization of hours times rate to let's try to spend as few hours as we possibly can and get the biggest possible result. So, it's a lot of fun, but it took us a little while to get the hang of it.
So one of the folks online, and maybe this is kind of I'm going to paraphrase the question, but she asked, how do you learn about the different niches? Is there any tools or edification that they can go by other than winning a client and talking to them as a function of saying, hey, what these different niches would be and what their requirements are? Any advice there?
Yeah, when I first started out, like in the contingent side, and we started getting more of those, I just was Googling all kinds of stuff and reading, people who were working for contingent firms and just kind of even just reading their websites, like, what's the focus here? What you can tell a lot from that, based on that. So, look, I tell everybody, and I tell the people who work for me, you should never be unprepared, because you're sitting at a desk and you got the most powerful search engine available, in the world.
So true. Yeah.
Go out, don't be intellectually lazy, be intellectually curious, go out, do a little research. Somebody has written something and somebody has already thought of everything it is you think you are the only one who's ever thought of it. So just search it and start there.
Yeah, what I found, to your point, what I found is that there are this sort of this niche of a lawyer that he or she really likes to talk about their business and blog about it for no other reason, just because they find it an intellectually interesting exercise. And those blog posts sometimes are a little dated, but can be very rich in exposing much of either the workflows that they go through in fulfilling their legal work, or the financials and all the different facets. So that's a really good point that, I think doing a little general research, and tell me if you think this makes sense, Brian, as to different types, whether you go contingency or you go defense side or whatever it might be, to try to get a nuance and then drill down deep. And that becomes essentially your potential ideal client. And then you build up, right? I mean, when I first started doing lien law, now I can speak to a lot of different types of niches of law because I'm talking to lawyers every day, right? I have to just learn because they're telling me their problems, right?
They'll
So
tell you problems.
that's the best way to learn. All right, we're at the hour.
Great.
Any just last parting wisdom for the audience?
I think that what I would say is, if you're not doing something now and you think you'd like to try to do it, for example, you want to work with contingent firms, don't assume that everybody who's there is actually doing it pretty well. We were stunned that when we got there, because we had just good fundamentals. We just had good business fundamentals, good legal business fundamentals. They work everywhere. Okay, so don't be intimidated and don't assume that some consultant or some provider has been doing it for 10 years, they're going to be great. Okay, you could just be the next greatest innovation, and you should try to do it.
Yeah, and when I heard, which I value the most of what you said, which is in that first meeting, be a good listener and really listen for what their hopes and dreams are. Because I think we get too caught up in the tool, in the report, in the in the mechanics and the workflows. And really what you're trying to do is, what I'm hearing is, create these human relationships with these people and help them get from where they are to where they need to go and navigate those waters. And it starts by listening and getting them to speak about what they want and aspire versus what's wrong.
I agree. I agree.
All right. I thank everyone for joining us today in our monthly meetup. I hope everyone will attend our State of the State. Brian, you and I will keep talking, and I really appreciate this conversation
Absolutely.
and taking the time to talk to us today. I thought it was really insightful, and I enjoyed it. And I'm going to wish everyone a great afternoon, a good Thanksgiving, and be safe, wear your masks, and have a great day.
You bet. Thanks.
All right.
See you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. See you, everyone.